When you walk into a supermarket, you're at war with junk food manufacturers. They've perfected how to package sugar, how to package calories for you.
2 milk chocolate cups absolutely filled with peanut butter.
Everything's been perfected down to how something feels when you bite on it. So now you have a situation where you have a brain that is basically built to manage food scarcity combined with a lot of food abundance, and then you have a stressful life on top of that. Good luck. Getting people to use what you build is the most difficult thing in the app process. As a fitness app, I perceive my competition to be Netflix and Instagram because I'm vying for my users' attention against billion-dollar apps that have been engineered to perfection to retain the attention of the user.
George, you left a good paying job at Bain to pursue your current company. Why?
That's a question I get a lot, actually. And sometimes it's counterintuitive for most. Because typically when you jump into entrepreneurship, that choice is typically easier if you don't already have something really good going for you. Because you're taking a risk on a very big upside, but then what you're walking away from is not a lot of opportunity cost. But when you do have a good career going for you, that choice becomes even more difficult. So then your motivation to switch has to be really strong, which was the case for me. And that motivation really lied in two main things. Number one, a very strong itch to create something that I'm very proud of, that exists out there in the world, that I can see, that I can feel, that other people are using, that is making a positive impact on the world, and that resembles me and what I want to create onto the world. And then number two is essentially this drive for entrepreneurship that I've always had from very early on. So there was this need to create and this desire to become an entrepreneur that is just building things and doing separate things. And actually, maybe I think they're a bit related. And I'll add another point on top of that, which is specifically related to Trainmate. Because fitness was always a passion. Coaching people was always a passion. Helping people improve was always a passion. So the only way to do that at scale is through tech. And I'm like, this seems like the best thing that I can do to combine everything that I love into one.
So it's a great segue into what is Trainmate exactly?
Right. So Trainmate essentially is an AI-powered fitness app that helps busy professionals stay consistent with their fitness and health via gamification and social gamification specifically.
How did you come across this idea? How did you know this is a problem? I always like to ask entrepreneurs this question to help the audience understand where the problem-seeking stage started and how it materialized into an issue. So when did you realize that staying healthy at work is something a lot of people struggle with?
Just by looking around me.
While you were in the consulting industry?
Anywhere. Just get on a plane. Look around. Go into a restaurant. Look around. Go to work. Look around. Talk to people. Right? We just had a conversation just now. Right? So every other person you meet will have some form of struggle with health and fitness. And it is such a core part of our life as humans. It's not like you can be into art or not into art. You can be into you can be into art or not into art. You can be, I don't know, into sports cars or not into sports cars. You cannot not be into health and fitness. It's not something you can afford not to be into.
True.
So it's a really big problem that people actually need help with. And when you look around you in society, you understand that, okay, most people struggle with this.
Yeah.
And we can talk about why that is. Because I think it's also a bit of a recent issue that has become bigger over time, let's say, only in the past 100 years. Because our lives have changed. The way we consume food has changed. The way we are marketed to has been extremely optimized to the point where people can sell you garbage as nutrition. So we're battling new demons today. When you walk into a supermarket, you're literally at war. You're at war with like junk food manufacturers because they've perfected how to package sugar, how to package empty calories for you with the right labels, with the right colors, where they put it on the shelf, the way the bag, sounds when it opens, the smell that comes out. Like everything's been perfected down to how something feels when you bite on it to make it addictive, with no regard whatsoever to, is it nutritious? Is it going to actually help this person get in shape? Is it going to be good for their health? No. It's the main two things they optimize for is profit and taste. Let them buy more of it, and how can we make it in the cheapest way possible? And this has happened recently with the food manufacturing and with marketing and with our lives becoming more sedentary and sitting down on a desk for the whole day. You're not really moving a lot. So more health problems are arising, right?
Just for audience members who haven't yet checked out Trainmate, and before I read the statistic that really highlights the size of the issue that we're talking about. So Trainmate's main focus is to gamify eating habits, right? Is that right?
So our main value proposition, or our main feature that we try to offer people, is getting the nutrition right. And the way we do that is we make it extremely simple. All the user has to do is take a picture of their meal, and the AI will essentially calculate all the calories, macros, and even give them information on whether this is a good food or a bad food for them. So that basically leaves very little excuse for not to learn about what you're eating and not to track your food throughout the day, which has been proven time and time again to be the best way to get in shape. Like nutrition is literally 80% of the battle. So if I can help you there, you're golden.
Of course.
Yeah.
Let me read you the statistic. So according to an article by Harvard Health, in the US, as of 2022, heart disease was the leading cause of death, and obesity rates grew from 30.5% in 2000 to around 42.4% in 2018. But only 22% of Americans follow the American Heart Association's dietary recommendations. So the problem is getting worse. People are aware of it, and fewer people are sticking to the recommended eating habits, eating recommendations. And before people tell me, maybe there are certain regions that are more susceptible to this, then there was a similar statistic as well in the UK, where it said in 2021, the health survey for England published by the NHS showed that 28% of adults are obese, 36% are overweight, only 34% are at a healthy weight, and just 2% are underweight. So the question I want to ask you is, why is it hard for people to stick to good eating habits?
Yeah. Before I answer that, also because we're in Dubai right now, right? Forget about the West for a second. Look at the region. The obesity rates in Saudi and in the UAE as well are also quite high. In Egypt, if you look at the region, we also have high obesity rates. We also have problems on that front. So this is by no means an American Western issue. It's a global issue. And specifically in the region, it's an issue. Now, in terms of why that is, what we've learned from talking to thousands of users and interviewing them and understanding their struggles, because that was a very important part of the product development process, is really understanding the minute challenges, the minute self-talk that happens throughout the temptations for food. Where do they break down? When do they binge eat? Why does it happen? What self-talk happens, etc. There's generally, I would say, it comes down to three things. A, there's limited self-control nowadays, right? Because the abundance of food, and again, the way it's marketed, is not something your brain has been developed to learn how to cope with. Your brain has been developed over hundreds of thousands of years to manage food scarcity, not food abundance.
Absolutely.
Right? You're meant to hunt for food, get it once it's there, eat as much as you can because you don't know if tomorrow you're going to be able to have food. So your brain is wired as such. And it's also quite motivated by certain tastes, by certain taste palettes, etc., which marketers and food producers use to keep you hooked on their own products. So now you have a situation where you have a brain that is basically built to manage food scarcity, combined with a lot of food abundance that is dialed up to 11 in terms of taste, buzz, and etc. And then you have a stressful life on top of that. Good luck, right? Really, good luck managing that situation. So when they try to make people feel bad because they don't have their eating habits in check or they're not doing great on their diet, yeah, but look at the environment that they're working with. Look at what they're working with, really. Also, keep in mind that, especially for the generation that recently came, like for the 90s generation, right? So millennials, their parents weren't educated on food. Like only recently you have social media and a lot of like content creators raising awareness. This is a very recent phenomenon. People forget this. If you go back to the 90s, when I was growing up, for example, the only source of information our parents had on whether a food was good or not was a TV commercial and the packaging. The little packaging on the label, like it says healthy, so it must be healthy. Like that's how naive we were, right? Like moms would make Nutella wraps as a lunch or a breakfast for their kids, right?
It's a
like,
healthy breakfast,
yes,
energetic breakfast.
so it was very few parents who were actually educated on this. So now you have a millennial generation that grew up with bad eating habits, also because their parents didn't know any better.
So you said, sorry, I'm just going to go back to the three. You said the brain is not used to self-control because of the environment we grow up in. The other one is the education. Is there a third point?
I think the stress, right? Because it can become a coping mechanism for many people, and it's so available. Like you just reach
Arm lengths away.
Yeah, you just reach. It's there, and there's a dopamine kick. Let's face it, right? When you eat a nice bar of chocolate, it makes you feel good in the moment. Obviously, it makes you feel like shit after. Not that you shouldn't eat chocolate, by the way. Let's be very clear in what we're saying here. I eat chocolate. I eat chips. I indulge in I love ice cream. Like I'm a fool for ice cream. So I indulge in everything. The whole premise or the idea here is not to be restrictive, rather be selective, and be kind of in control of when you integrate these things and how much do you integrate of them to stay in control of really your diet and your health and what you wanna achieve with your body.
To this point, I remember one experience I had with a nutritionist. A couple of years ago, I went to a nutritionist and I really wanted to understand how I can shed that stubborn layer of fat.
Yeah.
And around my belly. And one of the first questions that she asked me were, the question was, how are your portions? And I told her my portions are average portions. She said, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know, just a typical plate that you'd find in any household. And then I'll just fill it up with rice. And she said, how much rice? I said, I don't know, until the plate's full. And then, okay, how much chicken do you have? I said, until the rice is covered.
Yeah.
And how much salad do you have? Well, I get the smaller plate that you find in every household and I fill it up with salad. So she said, there are two things here that are missing from the equation. A, I'm not telling you to eat less. I'm just telling you to know how much you eat.
Yeah.
Because if we want to start monitoring, we need to have a benchmark, right? We start at point A and then we took it down to point B. If you want to lose fat or if you want to build muscle, we're taking it from point A to point C. The other thing is you need to be intentional. So when she would ask what I would eat for desserts or what kind of sugar I take in, I said, no, I just eat fruits. And then she said, how much? Well, I said, oh, the fruit platter that we have at night with the family, how much of that do you eat? I don't know, most of it. She said, that's another issue, right?
Yeah.
So onto this point, that educational aspect of being intentional with what we eat and how much we eat is just missing piece of the puzzle, because we were just like, oh, you need to eat to grow and you need to eat to stay healthy, but it's what and how much. But based on your conversations, because you do something that I really like, which is you're hands-on with feedback from the community members, the app users, and you're really keen on getting first-hand feedback from them. Was there anything that surprised you in terms of their own experiences when they shared with you some of the struggles of staying consistent with their eating habits?
It's an interesting question. Look, I think I never personally struggled with food. So it was an eye-opener in terms of, what other people's experience could look like. And it was extremely important for me to have these conversations and continue to have these conversations to build something that people actually want. Right? Because you don't want to build something for yourself only. I'm an avid user of my own app. I love it because there's so many aspects of gamification, motivation into it. But if I only build it for one particular segment of the population, then I'm not building it right. So I think it was an eye-opener in terms of what some other people tend to struggle with, why, how. And so many of them were very candid, and they shared very like vulnerable moments with me.
Any of which you can share?
So a common recurring theme amongst some of the people was the using food as a coping mechanism. And maybe that's a known fact, but when people describe to you how that process feels, it's very meaningful. For example, one of our users was telling me that when they would start essentially eating, they couldn't get themselves to stop. And it would become a thing where, okay, I'll start with one, then there's the second, then the third. And then a guilt feeling would kick in around the third cookie or fourth cookie. And this is when it gets pretty intense, because the guilt feeling, so that now it's no longer desire or hunger. Now basically, so the first cookie was essentially like, oh, okay, I feel like having it. The second was like, maybe I'll have another. The third is like, now it becomes a form of frenzy. They enter a frenzy when they're like eating it. Now the guilt goes up. Even with the guilt going up, they still can't stop themselves. And the more they eat, the more guilty they feel. And by the time they're done, they absolutely hate themselves.
Hate themselves.
Yeah, they're like, what did I do, etc. So because they feel like they don't have control over that. And then once they started using Trainmate, and I kid you not, and I always say this, I am 10 times happier when a user like that tells me after I started using Trainmate, I got my control back. Then, for example, an investor tells me, oh, I'm gonna lead the whole next round for you. Because everything follows from building something that is useful to people. And if you do that, everything else falls into place. So, and you're making such a positive impact on people's lives, right? It's not like I'm building a utility app to help you. Nothing against utility apps, for example. They're great, that I use them. But like, okay, you're helping me with an admin thing as part of my life. Like maybe you help me pay my bills, let's say. Great. But when you're building something that is impacting people so deeply and positively, and you see the smile on their face when they say, I'm over this problem now and I have a great relationship with food, like that's
fulfilling.
That's big, man. That's really big. Like imagine you built something, you gave it to someone, and it changed how they live for the better. It's there's no feeling like it.
Can't imagine what it's like to touch something so deep and so personal where people would open up about that range of emotions. Did you come across any interesting myths about food during this customer exploration journey?
Yeah. So plenty. Look, a big part of Trainmate is the educational aspect, because you're not just logging your food, you're learning about it as you go. And this was not, I must admit, this wasn't really built in by design. Like a lot of the times when you're building an app, you stumble upon features that you didn't mean to build. So when we built Alice, which is basically the AI nutritionist inside of the app, so Alice is the AI nutritionist inside Trainmate. Yeah. So people don't get confused. Alice is just the AI inside of Trainmate. People started using her to like log their food with a picture or log their food with chat. But then because we had engineered her in a way where every time she would log your food for you, she would leave like a small sentence at the end that would just kind of give you maybe a bit of, maybe she'd tease you a bit, maybe she'd congratulate you for a bit and leave some information as to why that was her reaction. People started learning a lot about their food. And a lot of them were like, wow, like I thought this was nothing. Like I thought this had no calories in it, for example, and it was very healthy. And then it turns out, oh, it's full of carbs. And I actually, not that carbs are bad, but like I had a misconception about this food, right? I thought I was eating 200 calories. I turned out I was eating 500 calories, for example. Conversely, some of the foods that they thought would be very high in calories were not high in calories. So they all had these aha moments of like, wow, okay, I didn't know this. So then they started adjusting their behavior accordingly. The most common one, everyone thought they were having more protein than they actually were.
Really?
Like that's like across the board. Like every single user I talked to, they're like, I thought I was having more protein. But then they learned that they were not. And the first misconception, I think, is driven by the size of the item, which is very interesting. Like people judge how how many calories are in something by its size, right? Because it's so intuitive to a human being. Like you look at something, like it looks small, so must not be a lot. Whereas in reality, it has nothing to do with how calorie dense something is. Like the mixed nuts, for example, are the smallest things that you can have, and they're also like nuts are healthy, and they are. But then nuts are packed with calories. So when you go out in the bar and you're having a beer or something, and then you're just like munching on these small things on the side, like that bowl has more calories than your beer, and you don't even know it. So those were a lot of aha moments that users had. And it was just like funny to see the looks on their faces when they realized that and they started adjusting the behavior, So yeah, that was cool.
Speaking about building and iterating as you go based on the feedback, one of our first discussions, you shared really interesting insights about small changes into the app that yielded a lot of big results. So as a bit of a background, building an app requires a deep understanding of human psychology and human behavior. And you're an avid lover of psychology anyways, and it so happened to help you build something that really works for the people. As you said, you want something that works for the masses and is able, through AI, you're able to tailor solutions or tailor the approach. What was it like building an app from scratch and then iterating along the way? What were some of the findings, or what was the starting point?
Yeah. Look, I think ultimately building a good app comes down to being able to engineer human behavior. Period. You're not, obviously, respecting UX, UI rules is important. Having good aesthetic is important. Being aligned on branding colors is important. But those are all an afterthought. First and foremost, you have to understand, what do I want my user to achieve and do broadly as part of my app? So what is my major objective? For us, it's how do we make busy professionals stay more consistent with their fitness through gamification and AI? That is our broad statement. And then within each individual feature, how are we designing this feature? What is the mini action I want you to do within this feature? For example, log your meal, or like log your workout, or compete, or add a friend, or compete your. So what is the micro action that I'm trying to help you do here that is going to help you achieve that broader objective? And then accordingly, how do I design that feature and that screen to that end in the most efficient, simple way possible? At Bain, for example, and we had the concept called CFR, which is called communicating for results. And I learned this from Bain, actually, because when you're presenting to a client at Bain, you're taught very early on that you should be very CFR. You should communicate for results. And what does that mean? It essentially means if you have 3 recommendations or 3 options on the table for the client, and you know that, let's say, option 2 is the best option, how are you going to design that slide in a way where the client's mind, naturally reading the slide, is going to gravitate towards option 2 as the natural option to take? You're helping them make that decision through how you're designing the slide and how you're building your slide. In app design, it's no different. The difference is, instead of talking to a CEO and the decision is maybe like a $500 million decision, you're talking to a user and that decision is just on their own personal life. How can I engineer the design in a way that helps you make the right decision?
Onto this point, I was researching some statistics about the importance of really building something that's, as you said, it communicates for results and is efficient. I think efficiency is a really key word. So according to a 2023 study by Forrester, 55% of consumers will abandon an app or a website if they cannot find what they're looking for in 3 clicks or less.
Yeah.
And that's just brutal. You have such a small margin of error where you want to make sure that the entire functionality for something that could possibly be very complicated and very deep has to be clear to the user within 3 clicks. And I remember one of the things you told me, especially because you're part of your mission is to help people stay consistent, right? So someone abandoning, I thought abandoning was such an intense word, but abandoning the app within 3 clicks would go completely against your mission. So was this a fear or a motivational element as you were building the app? It's a statistic like this.
It's just a reality. and it's a brutal one. I think people who have never built apps before think that it's such a easy business. You just build an app, put it on the app store,
Make money.
yeah, you're making money or whatever. It's not. And getting people to use what you build is the most difficult thing in the app business. Everything else is very easy. Because once people use your product, everything else makes sense. Now, why is it difficult? So coming back to that stat that you mentioned. When you are an app, where are you? You're on the person's phone. Okay? You're an icon on the person's phone. What's next to you? Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. Billion-dollar apps that have been engineered to perfection to retain the attention of the user. So what is your user used to? He's used to that kind of an experience where it's so easy, it just keeps flowing for me, it's just constant dopamine injections, and it's just so, effortless pleasure. And now you have to build something where you're actually asking the person to do something. You're asking them to log the meal, you're asking them to do the workout, and you have to find a way to make it engaging enough so that you can compete for their attention with an Instagram. Like as a fitness app and as Trainmate, I don't perceive my competition to be, other fitness apps. I perceive my competition to be Netflix and Instagram because I'm vying for my users' attention against those other things. Like I'm trying to push you that instead of just binging for 4 hours on Netflix, why don't you do a workout for an hour? Now, how can I design the app in a way that is engaging, motivating enough to convince you to do that?
Sounds impossible.
It does, right? And it feels like it's impossible sometimes, but it is possible.
There was a similar statistic here, and it says a recent report from Digital Intelligence revealed that apps using gamification see a 40% increase in user engagement compared to those that don't. And obviously gamification is a core element of Trainmate. Now, when I read this app and when I heard you talk about Trainmate for the first time, I said, well, maintaining your health is a very serious topic. And these statistics that we read about, obesity rates and heart issues, these are all very serious topics. And now we want to add gamification, which almost sounds like you're taking the problem down and you're making it less serious, less important, but it gives you more results. Why is it that gamification actually works? Why is it that gamification is actually engaging to people, whether you're learning a language or trying to monitor how you eat and building a new behavior?
Yeah. Look, I think ultimately it's not the gamification within of itself, it's what the gamification produces. And it's those happy chemicals. Happy chemicals are essentially can be summarized into, if I recall it correctly, DOSE, something called DOSE, like DOSE, essentially dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And as human beings, we are primarily driven by, in any situation, we're driven by one or more of these chemicals at the same time, right? Dopamine is typically like your motivation chemical. So that's when you're trying to achieve something, it's dopamine that's helping you to keep going. So when our ancestors were hunting, the reason they could run for so long is they would run after the prey, they would lose sight of it, they would run faster. Once they see it, they'll get a spike in dopamine because that target was getting closer so they could run more. Serotonin is what we call usually the social happy chemical. So it's when you connect with other people, you get recognition from others, you get some spike in serotonin. Oxytocin is more like when you pet a dog or hug a baby, or like that's that kind of connection. So without going into too depth into each one of them, when you gamify, you're tapping into that. Because when I'm rewarding you on Trainmate with points because of your meals and workouts and steps, and then I'm allowing you to flex that on the leaderboard and on the feed for other users to see, I'm giving you short-term gratification that is spiking your serotonin because they're liking your achievement, they're liking your behavior. Whereas if you were to do that outside of the app, you wouldn't have gotten that instant gratification from fitness. And a big issue in fitness today, it is a long-term gratification game. And humans suck at long-term gratification, right? That was the first problem that I realized very quickly. Is because when people get into fitness, let's face it, they get into fitness for the aesthetics, right? Very few of them get into it because of the health benefits. Usually the ones that do are because they're already facing a health problem in their life. They're trying to counter it with fitness. But if you're a perfectly healthy person and you're getting to fitness, it's usually for the aesthetics. Problem with aesthetics, it's a long-term game. You're not going to see abs in 2 weeks, my friend, right? So I was thinking like, okay, if I can't help them see abs in 2 weeks, how can I give them those dopamine and serotonin spikes along the way to help them reach that goal ultimately? So how can we integrate short-term gratification into fitness? And gamification is the best way to do it.
I love how you tap into human nature, because at the end of the day, people feel like, and especially with the rise of AI, they see AI as a replacement for human beings in different situations. And few people see it as an integration and really doubling down on how humans behave. I mean, the evolution of AI in itself, it's a different topic, but part of it could be argued that it's almost a pursuit of efficiency. What we already do, we just want to do it better, faster, more accurately. And then when you add this gamification element to something that's so intimate, and you just want to make sure that, hey, I want you to do things a little bit differently, but I want to make sure that I'm also fulfilling your natural human instincts and your natural human behavior and those chemicals that are released into your body, so that you enjoy the process, you see results, and hopefully those two elements combined will help you stick to the track and really have a long-term behavioral change. There's this one point I forgot to mention. Business of Apps reports that 24% of Android apps were uninstalled within 1 day after download. And then 49% of them were uninstalled within a month after they're downloaded. So I think this taps into the gamification element and the importance of the 3 clicks or really captivating the user, especially when you have these competing apps. You told me a story the other day about the user journey when they first download Trainmate and how you had to make it so much more engaging. You had to make the value proposition very clear, very early on. What did that look like? How did you come across the realization that you needed to change something to make the app more engaging?
Yeah. So you need to measure. I think with apps, one good thing is you have the luxury of data. Versus, for example, if you're opening a restaurant, you can measure some stuff, but it's a bit more difficult to capture the full user journey. With apps, you have that luxury, right? You can actually measure what users are doing on your app. Where are they churning? Where are they engaging? How does that journey look? And if you're launching an app you're not measuring, you're shooting yourself in the foot. That's the first thing you should do. So it's through data, right? You have to measure, okay, 100 people downloaded the app. How many made it past the sign up? How many finished the onboarding? How many signed up for a trial? Of those that signed up for a trial, how many actually use the product, what we call activation? From those that actually use the product, how many end up paying and consistently using the product? Those are like asset test KPIs that can tell you a lot about your app. And so much of the app experience, like so much of when you win or lose a user, happens in the first 15 minutes of them interacting with your product. It's basically the onboarding and walkthrough. Probably even less. I'm being generous with 15 minutes. They're trying to make up their mind very quickly about your product, mind you, with a very skeptical eye as well, because there's so many apps out there. Especially if they found you through an ad on Meta, they're already thinking you're bullshit. And I don't blame them, to be very honest, because there are a lot of bullshit apps out there, especially in the fitness space, that promise 6 packs in 6 days by doing 6-minute workouts at home, which is horrendous. So these people have been lied to before. I've been lied to before with ads and apps. You've been lied to before with ads and apps. So can you really blame someone for being skeptical? So you really have to earn their trust, and you have to earn it very quickly. You have to show them that there's value, and you have to do it in like the first 5-10 minutes, or you lose them. And you have to measure their journey to understand if you're doing that successfully or not.
Earning their trust sounds much easier said than done, especially when I feel like it's something that you also have to do prior to someone downloading the app, right? Because I feel like the skepticism starts from when they see this ad and they're like, oh, another fitness scam. Oh, and it's paid as well. There you go. You know what? I might as well just take a shortcut and report this to the police. Just like, why go through the pain of being scammed? How do you navigate this busy space of misinformation, of genuine malice, where some people, it's not misinformation, some people don't know any better, but some people genuinely go out there and take advantage of those who want to better their lives. And then there are individuals like yourself who are truly building something to benefit people. How do you stand out within this crowd? Where does this educational transparency, authenticity shine? At what stage?
Look, I mean, that's a whole science of branding, right? And product design, because that's done on two different fronts. You don't, because coming back to what you said, right? Even before they download the app. So you would split that in two. There's an element that you have to do on top of funnel. We call it top of funnel. So basically, are you putting yourself enough out there? Are you marketing yourself enough? Are you talking about your mission enough? I, as a founder, should be out there being the evangelist for the brand, showing that I stand for what I believe and I stand behind what we built. So a lot of it is around building trust even before someone touches the app, right? By too many different levers. Then there's the element around when someone is aware of your brand and they're kind of more ready to convert, then you also have to think about what kind of creatives or ads are you putting up for someone to convert. Are you making false promises? Or are you being true to your mission? Or are you trying, is it honest or not? Okay, then you have to go down the funnel a bit more. Now they're using the product. So are you delivering on the promise that they've heard on the top of funnel, on the branding side of things, on the more conversion side of things? Are you delivering on that promise? And are you delivering that experience and that value that they're expecting or not? And once you do that, you have promoters, you have users, and I would say we're blessed with that. I have users that will, if they were to sit here in this chair and talk about Trainmate, they'll do better than I do. And that's for me my biggest pride and joy.
The promise sounds like a commitment that's interesting. I look at things like financial tools, financial efficiency, where our promise is without going into politics, I just remembered this exists in certain governments, but where people come in and they say, hey, we'll promise that we'll save you X amount of money across these different places. So there are these tools, you can download an app and it'll tell you, hey, we'll spot your spending behavior. We'll help you save X amount of dollars at the end of every month. In your case, however, the promise really depends on someone making the effort and sticking to it. So how do you navigate that interesting space? Well, what do you promise people with Trainmate?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the results that people see from Trainmate are twofold. The first is behavioral, then the second is physical. So prior to them seeing a change in the mirror, they see a change within. And they're like, oh, I suddenly feel more consistent. I'm more motivated. I have a good relationship with food. I'm enjoying this fitness thing for once. They realize. So that is all by how the app is designed and built as such. And that is not an easy task by any means. That is a result of a significant amount of iteration and user feedback to get to that level. So that is already what they feel in the beginning. Then is followed by the by the physical changes that they see in the mirror, on the scale, etc. And that's kind of where it all comes together for them, right? But to your point as to how do you guarantee that people are going to come through on their own promise to themselves to see the results, you cannot. That's the simple truth. You cannot. But if you are able to change the behavior, right, that is a catalyst to everything else. And if you're even able to change the behavior even ever so slightly and show them that it's possible, I think people will understand that you've delivered your part of the bargain, right? Like I've shown you how it's done. I've made it easier for you. I've made you more motivated. Now you have to help you, right? By going and then doing the work a bit more. And I think people understand that, right? They see that because so many apps don't even do that. Like they don't even, you come on and it's, You know what I mean?
6
Yeah.
minutes.
So people get it. I believe in the goodness of people, right? When they see that you've actually helped them become more motivated, they'll be like, okay, hands up. Maybe I didn't. They're honest with themselves, right? They're like, okay, it's on me this month that I didn't show up, but yeah, the app was actually making me more motivated, and they come back. So sometimes they might go dormant for a couple of weeks, and then you see them come back because they're ready to take it on.
Interesting. Not sure if you're at liberty to share a statistic like this. Do you see patterns in human behavior on the app? So an individual would sign up, stick to it, and then maybe travel or work comes up, and then now they're unavailable, or they use it less, and then they come back at certain times. Are there established trends that you can not generalize, but you can say that a certain percentage of users fall in, or is it truly very individual to the extent where it's hard to group the users into a certain behavioral pattern?
Yeah.
Or NDA material, our users have to sign it.
No, I mean, look, it's nothing you will not see by looking around you in any gym you usually go to, or looking around in your friends group. You will have some of our users are super athletes, right? It's not like we are only serving people who struggled with nutrition or need a lot of help. Some of our users, like me, for example, have been always into sport and love the app because it gives them that one-stop shop, gamified view of their fitness that they can stay competitive and stay motivated on every week. So if you were to break them down to buckets, you have the top zoners on the app, the people who are ranking super high on leaderboard every week and they're going after it. Those are people who have been working out for a very long time already. They've tracked their food already in some form or capacity, and they're on the app because it makes all of these things much more enjoyable and fun for them, and they can do it with their friends and compete with their friends on it, which means the world for them. So they're very consistent. They come in, week out. They're always there. They're evangelizing about the app for others. They're the biggest referrals. Then you have the second bucket, which are more people who were never into sports to a great extent, were never into fitness to a great extent, maybe got on the app with the initial intention to lose weight, and never really were into working out a lot, but relatively active. And those, what I see is they tend to now, compared to before in their life, show up every week. They might not show up in a massive way every week, so they might not get 2,000 points on the leaderboard every week and they're killing it, but they're there. They're constantly there. And that's what matters, consistency, right? So they do see the results, they get them, but they fluctuate. You have weeks in, and then you have the third category, which are people who I would say maybe we failed till now. I take accountability in terms of activating them properly on the app. And that's kind of what I'm working on solving now. People who got on, but didn't get it. They didn't understand what the app can do for them very quickly. They didn't really, we went wrong somewhere in that user journey with them, right? And that's something we're investigating. How does someone download the app, maybe log one meal or do, let's say, not one workout and then disappear? What happened? Why? Right? And those are some of the people that could fall into two categories. Either we failed them because something went wrong with the user journey where we couldn't explain the value enough, or something's happening in their own life where they downloaded the app out of curiosity, or they're not ready to commit at all. They're going through some self-defeating cycle where they're not confident that they can make the change yet, So there are many reasons that can happen. And that's where investigation matters. That's where reaching out to these people to get feedback matters.
Absolutely. Especially when it could potentially be a gray area, where it could either be genuine excuse, something happened and they could no longer commit, or something a little bit deeper, or much deeper actually, which is we can cater to maybe 70% of the health seekers, but then the bottom 30%, the very early on, maybe they need a little bit more information or a different kind of structure. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the next iteration to address that.
You can't, by the way, to your point, you as a app, you can never serve everyone. If you try to, you're gonna fail. You cannot build for everyone. You have to understand who you're building for. And with Trainmate, we typically focus on those first two categories the most. Namely because we don't do for example, as much hand holding maybe as some other apps do, because we assume a bit some initial information, some initial background in fitness as you're coming into it.
Otherwise, yeah, it feels like you might have to do a lot of groundwork in terms of educating people on some of the basics, and it could maybe dilute the mission and dilute what the app does.
Some apps do that. They do that well.
Nothing wrong with it.
But that's not kind of what we're trying to do right now. I'm trying to focus on people who are already dabbling with some form of fitness, or like that they are actually a bit more committed, and then helping them get more consistent, dial it, and get everything right.
You mentioned the leaderboard, and yet again, I have an interesting statistic here. A study by Professor Vikram Chib at Johns Hopkins University found that participants improved their performance by 5% and up to 20% when performing in front of others. And I remember you mentioned that the leaderboard or the community aspect was a game changer.
Yeah.
Was it always in your mind to include a leaderboard, or was it something that you eventually iterated and came across by observing some user and collecting user feedback?
So it was based on studying my own behavior on other apps. And I always love this saying. There's this saying by Freud that says, if you want to become, I think it was by Freud, it says, if you want to become a psychologist, start by studying yourself. You know, because all humans have similar drivers. And if you can understand what triggers you and what moves you and what drives you, you can then now reverse engineer that to know what's going to drive others, what's going to motivate others. So I started when we were doing Trainmate, and I wanted to figure out the retention problem. Like, how can we make people stay on the app? I'm like, okay, what other apps out there are doing similar or on a similar mission, whether that's language learning or fitness or any other aspect, and then how are they doing it successfully? And I specifically looked outside of fitness because that wasn't really present in fitness. So I looked at language learning, I looked at a few other spaces, and I started using the apps on purpose, not because I wanted to learn a language, not because I wanted to do something else, but because I just wanted to understand why. Why are people staying? And I started noticing the behavioral patterns in myself. Like, that's what I'm thinking in the morning. Oh, when I get that notification, that's the feeling that I get. When I see that color, that's what makes me feel. That's when I felt like I wanted to reach for the app. That's when I felt like I didn't want to reach for the app. Why? Write it down. So studying myself like my own guinea pig, essentially, to understand what will work. And I started implementing those things onto Trainmate with our own, of course, touch and approach to things. But the concepts of a leaderboard, of, you know, a feed, of a community aspect of things. Like I looked at Instagram, for example. Like, why is Instagram addictive? When do I check notifications? Why do I check them? You just listen in on yourself, listen in on your thoughts, and see what's going on when you're using apps, and then take the good stuff and then put it into your product.
What impact did you see, or let me rephrase that. What impact did the community have on Trainmate? How did the users react to this when they share their feedback with you? Did it empower them to go further? Was it a sense of camaraderie? I'm not alone on this mission. Was it more of, man, like, I can't stand the fact that some person overtook me on the leaderboard? What kind of feedback did you collect?
Oh man, there's some stories. So there's two guys that come to mind on the on the app, and hyper competitive males. So they didn't know each other. And then there was 1 week when they started competing on the number one spot for the leaderboard. So then imagine Thursday, for example, Yahya is up there. It's called Yahya and Asper. So Yahya was up, and then Asper overtook him. And that cycle would keep going like a Looney Tunes cartoon. You know what I mean? It was like going back and forth like this. Eventually, they find each other on Instagram somehow. Like, one of them finds the other on Instagram, uninvited, adds him, and be like, "I'm gonna kick your ass this week." The first spot is mine. Obviously, jokingly, right? But people, like, we got people to care that much about, you know, the point system and their experience on the app, to the point where they're super motivated. So there's those stories, and then there are other stories of people who are in the second category, right? So people that dabbled with fitness, weren't sure about their nutrition, the majority of the people we're trying to help that come on and they're like, now they look at the people in the first category as inspiration, as motivation. Because now if I'm in the 12th spot and I'm looking and I see this, for example, beautifully consistent person on the top, I can click on their profile on Trainmate and learn. I can see what are their favorite workouts, what did they do this week, how many steps, how well did they eat, what workouts did they do, what are they eating. I can see literally what they're eating. So now that second category of users are using the first category as inspiration and motivation and as a learning kind of indirect mentors, essentially, right?
Makes sense. And it's nice to see that it's empowering because of the way it's designed. It doesn't have that toxic element, the toxic feeling that is usually associated with a place where you can see how well other people are doing. Because you can easily see this fake narrative everywhere you look, every platform you open. There's always someone celebrating that they're living a great life and that they're doing amazing, but it's almost like a secret. How? You don't know.
Yeah.
What's behind this success? You don't know.
Exactly.
Was it easy? No. I mean, when you access someone's workout and you see that maybe it was an intense workout and their heart rate reached this much or they walked X number of steps, you're like, okay, so it wasn't easy that they did this. Whereas on other platforms and the way people share it, it sounds like it's a fairy tale.
I was born like this.
Exactly. and I love how it's designed to really focus on the value of, please learn from others, and you'll see that it requires dedication. This person logged every single bite that day, every single calorie. Not to be over obsessive, but like they're dedicated to that extent.
Correct.
Or they never missed a workout, or maybe if one of their goals was to move every day. So I love that element maintains a sense of, I enjoy keeping track of what people are doing, staying up to date with the leaderboard. It's not something I want to dissociate from or feel like, oh, now I feel like I'm so behind and the gap is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, completely agree. And look, and you've described it so perfectly, because one of the things that we're trying to do is contextualize results in function of effort. Biggest issue today on social media is that everyone sees the end result. No one sees the work behind it. Whether that's in fitness, that's in business, family, whatever. You just see pictures of happy couples and happy families. You just see someone driving a Lambo or whatever. If that's what you want, great. For me, it's a bit cringy, but anyways, like you see basically the materialistic success being flaunted. You see someone with a six-pack ab and great, and you're like, okay, great. I want it maybe, but how? And then you start, and then you're like, whoa, this is very difficult. And then that question comes up. What's that question? Is it me? Am I doing it wrong? Or is it actually that difficult? And you don't have the answer to that question. And that's where most people fail. I swear, that question is the most horrible question that has destroyed dreams, whether that's in startups, business, when people walk into a process that is meant to be extremely difficult, for example, without the proper expectations, right? And then the natural conclusion is, it must be me. Because it seems easy that other people are doing it. They're successful. They have the results. There's no way they suffered that much to get those results. So it must be me. It must be that's not for me. But when you open the hood and you show them what's under it, they're like, oh shit, now it makes sense. So now when they hit that wall, they're like, oh, but actually, it doesn't feel so bad anymore because I know it's no more part of the process. I know that this is how it's meant to be. And that's in everything in life. That's fitness, business, anything, and that's the importance of having the access to see what people who are really fit, for example, what do they do? Like you see, they walk 70,000 steps per week, 10,000 steps per day. You see, they're working out 280 minutes a week. You see, they have a food score of 600 on Trainmate. Doesn't come easy. You see them posting every day a workout. Yeah. And that also, by the way, makes you question what you want, because you're like, maybe I'm not willing to do all of this. So I'll settle for something a bit less than this person in terms of results. That will work for me. But then now I can calibrate the effort I'm targeting in function of what is the sacrifice I'm willing to make. But you have the knowledge, and with the knowledge comes the power and the assurance of what you're doing. And I know what I'm doing now. I'm not confused anymore. Right?
As we wrap up, and someone's listening to this story and they listen to your journey, you were crushing it at Bain. You were enjoying it as well, and now you're crushing it with Trainmate. And someone might have the perception that, well, George might be one of those individuals who was just born with the key to life. You know, you put him anywhere and he'll do great. But what are some of the sacrifices and behind the scenes difficulties that you faced or continue to face now as you're building this platform to hopefully be not just a regional success, but something that hopefully creates an impact on a global scale?
Look, there's a lot of, I'll tell you this, if you're doing anything in life, especially if it's difficult and there's a lot of people that are trying to do the same thing, or like whether it's entrepreneurship or getting into consulting or whatever, there is, no matter how talented you are or how smart you think you are, there is a certain level of pain that you're going to have to swallow, no matter what. And I am by no means someone who left Bain and I suddenly knew all these things that we're talking about today. No. I didn't know any of this when I started. And I had to like literally bang my head against the wall and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep going to figure things out. And the most challenging part, because I get this question a lot as well, like what's the hardest part about entrepreneurship, right? Because at Bain Consulting, also like you work very hard. You're working 14, 15 hours a day sometimes. Even some weekends are sacrificed. You travel a lot. So you're working hard, right? Okay, you're working hard in entrepreneurship too, similar hours if not more, but similar. So then what's the difference? It's the uncertainty. And that's really the most difficult part of it. Because here you have the reassurance lever. So you have a salary coming in at the end of the month that you know is coming in. You're getting a lot of validation from your seniors that you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, and there's a clear roadmap written for you that you're following. So you know it's going to pay off all this pain. You have reassurance coming in from your juniors too when they tell you, hey, I love working with you and it's going very well. So there's all around you, there's these, feel good things coming at you that, okay, this is going to pay off. I'm going to even get a salary at the end of the month and everyone's telling me I'm doing a good job. So you go home in the weekend, you feel good about yourself when you worked very hard. In entrepreneurship, you don't have that luxury. You can be working very hard for 2 months and not see anything. Like, not see anything. If not see like negative results, like you have less money now. You don't have the users coming in. The employees are not doing the right thing. You can't find the right people to work with you. And you're working very hard. You're working much harder than you were there, and yet nothing's happening. And then the creeping doubt comes in of, wait, like the question again, right? Is it supposed to be this hard or is it me? That question comes in. And your ability to manage that question and manage uncertainty and keep going is what's gonna make or break you as a founder. And I think that you derive the force to keep going from self-belief and from just the sheer will of saying, no matter how hard this gets, I don't give up. I will never give up. And I will find, by hook or crook, I'm going to find a way to make this work. Trainmate might come out the other side not looking like a fitness app, but I bet you it's going to work somehow. Like somehow this thing is going to work. I don't care. And if you can have that attitude from the beginning, you can find a way to make it work.
Well, George, I have no doubt that you will. And make it work, to me, sounds like an understatement in terms of what you'll be achieving. I think it'll be a smashing success. So I can't wait to see that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experiences and for inspiring many people. And I look forward to a lot of people downloading, experiencing Trainmate for themselves, and hopefully soon celebrating maybe an IPO.
So a bit soon for that, but thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun. It's not our first conversation together, and every time we sit together, it's really a pleasure. So many new topics come up as well. Like it's never the same conversations. It's never the same. Never the same topics. So really good talking to you, man. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure is mine.